Where'd he go?
Oh, yeah.
Whoops. Whoops.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Where'd he go? They left at the same time.
Yeah.
He said when he comes back, I thought he meant when we come back live.
Huh.
Is this where they say good afternoon and we're experiencing technical difficulties?
This is where you get up and stand and tell jokes.
The invisible. I thought if it was Friday, it would be karaoke. Tuesday is comedy club night. Didn't realize he was stepping out, so I guess we either send someone on a mission or we end up calling this the most embarrassing adjourned 1 minute. Him and Chris were both standing there 2 seconds ago. They turned around and walked from there to there and they're gone.
Still here, sorry.
I'll
be back.
Yes. Technology, everything.
So we could walk through here, but he was doing that.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't give you an opportunity. And we are welcomed back here for Tuesday afternoon, March 11th, picking back up on the T-bill in section 11 after a short afternoon break. So welcome back, Damien, and let's go back to where we were with state aid for town highways
Okay,
and class 2 road program.
so picking back up, for the record again, I'm Damien Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. So as we were discussing before, when I was drafting this, I had inadvertently removed, or I guess intentionally removed this language, not fully understanding the structure of the program. That sets a minimum for new grants. I think the consensus we were reaching before this is that we want the minimum to stay in. In talking to JFO and AOT, the proposal would be to leave that language in and add in language that just ties it to the inflator for the appropriation so that everything just kind of goes up together smoothly. If you have a year where there's deflation, you'll have everything will stay flat together, and otherwise it'll track the inflation and it'll be the same inflator that's used for the appropriation. And then the important thing to know is that and this is where I was getting myself a little bit tied up. So I appreciate the clarifications that I got during the break. You appropriate the money in one fiscal year and you approve grants in that fiscal year, but because of the nature of these projects, the money isn't actually paid out necessarily in the same fiscal year the grant is approved. So, but we're just making sure that the approvals track with the appropriations over time so that you're getting growth in the approvals and keeping that consistent while ensuring that the amount of money that's going to towns under these 2 programs increases over time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Great. We'll table this one and come back to this one.
All right.
Which I guess is the same as the next.
Let's make a quick note to myself to,
So that's 7.2 will always, well, assuming the index always goes up, that'll be a rotating.
yeah,
So
so
that will
that,
always be a new minimum. Assuming.
yeah, so what we'll say is beginning with fiscal year 2027, this amount, the base amount will increase by the percentage change in the appropriation pursuant, or by the same percentage as the change in the appropriation. So, and I'll massage the language so it actually stays in. Okay, so
I'm sorry, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but the town highway class 2 roadway program.
Same
follows the
thing.
Same language and starts at 8.6 million.
yep, it starts at 8.6. So what I will do is I'll rework this so that the qualifying projects approved total cost of 8.6, and then beginning in FY27, that will increase by the same percentage change as the increase in the appropriations. So or,
Okay, and then we'll leave this one open until the next time you're back and we're good to go to section 12 in a minute. Does that sound right?
look in my notes, so I know where to make changes.
So,
All right, section 12, mileage-based user fee. So I'm going to actually skip over this portion. Patrick had been working on some language, updated proposal from AOT here. So if you'll remember, I did the bare minimum in this language, which was just to move out the date by a year to July 1, 2026. AOT has a proposal for you. It came in after I finished the draft. So I'll just include it in the next draft. So this should just be left open as a section for committee consideration. Does that make sense?
and I guess now it might be a little bit of time as far as the mileage-based user fee. We asked in our letter to the appropriations for $3 million to program mileage-based user fee because the understanding is that we're not going to get the grant that was going to pay for that piece. I don't know if we have an official word that that grant was officially canceled or not. Appropriations is looking potentially, at least they mentioned with their liaison that they would take an update at some point. We do have the matching money that was put out there, so we conceivably could ask for a little bit less than the 3 million to match what the original plan was. They're not closing the door yet on that money, if that's something that we're going to continue to work on. I was approached today, and I would say that let out there that if we wanted to send a clarifying letter about the 700,000 that we do have, and that we could potentially, if the agency could still go ahead with 2.2, and if there was a way to work within that money or not, they're not saying we're getting it, but they're not closed the door yet on potential money for mileage-based user fee, understanding that the first year of revenue that was collected would be more than what it cost us to program it. So I see some nods and understanding. I want to let the committee know that in my perspective, it's at least still alive for that direction. But we will see the language, and in addition to that, we'll see the language and changes that will reflect our new status on that. And I guess we're still watching every day to see what will happen with that grant money. But I'm still trying to fight for the money to spend the money so that we're actually returning money. And not every program that goes in to the appropriations promises to bring new revenue back in return. So although I'm very fortunate that they seem to agree to the JTOC, not transferring that money. We're going back for a second go around, but this time we're promising some money back in return. So anyway, I wanted to let the committee know that's where that is still at. If you have a comment, Representative Keyser.
Yeah, thank you. So let's see what page I'm on, 22. And section C, how the anticipated mileage fees, budget, where are we going? Oh, the amount collected by the state in gas tax revenue. I'm going to suggest that that we would include the state and federal gas tax revenues. In other words, equivalent to the total amount that a gas vehicle would pay is 56 cents approximately. And here it's only something like 38 or something. So I would want to make it federal and state gas tax.
Yeah, I mean, Representative Keeson brought this up before. I think it's a good idea as long as we do that until the federal government gets their act together and says, we're losing money. We need to, whether they ever do or not, it seems fair. I mean, it's, what you would pay. And I'm, assuming whatever that final rate would be wouldn't be the highest possible level, but it would be an average sort of fee. Seems appropriate.
So we need to get more feedback across the room. Do we need to ask JFO what kind of money impact that would have? Do we need to ask for new language? And I apologize, I was a little late to the discussion on that. So
we're gonna have new language anyway, because we have the MBUF language coming from the agency. that I still need to add in. And then if we were going to add in the federal government, so on line 16 here, it says the amount collected by the state in gas tax revenue, and this would change to the amount collected by the state and federal government in gas tax revenue, and you'd make that change down here on line 18 as well for plug-in hybrids. So the first amount is for non-plug-in electric vehicles. The next is for plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, since they will presumably in many cases consume significantly less gas if they're used mostly on their battery power around town, or maybe a little bit less if they're used for longer trips. It really depends on use, but that's an easy drafting change. I can't speak to the practical ramifications of getting that info. And I would certainly defer to all the folks we have from the agency here.
That's a discussion we can pick up at some point from here forward, appreciating the suggestion and the sort of confirming or also agreeing worth looking at again. So I think that would drive some conversation for the language, but you're headed through changes anyway. Did you want to speak to that or not? I wasn't sure.
Sure. For the record, Pat Murphy, my agency, transportation. So before any mileage goods user fee is actually implemented, there would still need to be a statutory language, and that's a part of what will be included in the next draft that you see. And so, if the committee doesn't want to tackle this specific question of what rate is to be charged, that can be something that is taken up when we propose statutory language next January. So you can provide directional language if that's the wish of the committee, but it's also something that isn't critical to what we need to be able to continue developing the mileage-based user fee.
Yeah, it's worth noting too that this is language from the report that was due in January. So actually, now that I'm realizing it, I think this report has already been submitted, or is it delayed? Yeah, so it's January 31, 2024. So the report's already come in. So the question would be if you want a new report. So I'm sorry, I didn't realize that when we were first talking about it. But this is actually language from a request for information that was already provided to the committee last biennium. And then presumably when you come back to consider the mileage-based user fee implementation, once that's developed and you set the rate, you'd be looking at this information anyway. So question is whether you want new statutory language to basically require, I guess the piece here would be a recommendation on what language should be codified to enable the state to commence collecting on whatever date you set a mileage-based user fee, and we could just put that in a new report section or to update the report that was submitted. And that also might be another way to do it, is to just say, rather than saying write a new report, update the 2024 report with additional information, based on the implementation process, with the additional proviso that the comparison includes both the state and federal gas tax that would have been collected. And I can work with Patrick to figure out how to phrase that. But that's something we've done historically with the capital bills, where we're moving away from requiring a new report every 2 years on the same subject, and instead saying, please just update the report you already did. Because for those of you who haven't looked at the reports database on our website, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands of reports. And that's just the last 15 years. And so I'm assuming most of you haven't read the reports from before you were here. So a lot of times that information is already out there. So we're trying to minimize that burden where we can.
Representative Pouch?
Thank you. I'm not quite sure why we even need a report. I mean, we want the language to put in the statute that says, here it is. And as we do that, I mean, there'll be these couple of final decisions, but I think it should be our intention to do, you know, state and federal, the equivalency of that.
You could also just put in an intent section.
Yeah, that's our intent.
It is the intent, of the General Assembly to implement on whatever date you choose, mileage-based user fee on plug-in electric vehicles that, and you could say what that rate is. Keep in mind, it's non-binding, but it's just, it would set forth the intent of this legislature if you wanted to do that. And that would do away with any reporting requirement, but it would give some guidance to the agency as they come in with proposed language on implementing the MBUF in a couple of years.
And it's my understanding, you know, the grant money would have been there to understand what in the computer systems have to be changed. Lay out the processes, you know, and here's a forms that have to be and how the payment systems would work. So, you know, it would be good that, you know, in a year or whatever the time it takes, it's like, here's the system with the intent of collecting those fees.
Okay. Well, from my perspective, then, we know we're reworking this language. Representative Keys or Representative Pouch have input to it and suggestion with our legislative council, and you guys, as needed, the help that they might need would come to you in addition to JFO and put it together. And then we'll revisit it as a committee when it's put together, right? So we know where we're going with this section, I guess.
Okay.
And are there other topics in addition to this section, please?
I think the only open question is the funds to do it. Right?
We still have to
yeah.
we still have to secure them, but
Right.
I can tell you certainly with the suggestion you made, that it makes an even more attractive case.
Yeah.
So, at least to me, but I'm not on appropriations, but it certainly makes that conversation even better. So,
If I, you know, not throwing the agency under the bus, but if we said do it, you know, you have policy people, you have people that you could do it. I mean, if you had to do it, you could do it without additional funds, I assume. But, you know, that would throw everything else off, you know, other policy and activities with DMV would slow them down. Or
this is one of those struggles that I have with private business versus government funding in buckets. If it's not there, I couldn't agree more from my own business background that I would say, just do it. But if the funding for the activity that they do is not in that particular bucket, then we can't do it. I guess at least that's my take on that. And I apologize to take it off there. I couldn't agree more that when I make a decision in our business, we just do it. So it doesn't necessarily work this way. Did you need to comment on top of that, or does that work?
Well, I would just point out, because there are new members on the committee, that the funds are appropriated into specific line items. And if we were to try and come up with $3 million in state funds, it was within that particular line item that didn't have, even if we say it was in the policy planning and research line item, there's may not even be $3 million in state funds in that line. We do nothing else. We wouldn't draw down any federal funds that we were going to do any reports that are required of us. You know, we would not have the ability to like draw it from the highway line of bridges or anything like that. So it's just, we are constrained to the appropriation line on your budget sheet. And we would probably find ourselves back here explaining why we couldn't do it, versus just doing it because we are a private business. And we do have to pay the contractors to do the programming and all the work that has to happen and communications, et cetera. Yes.
It's worth asking.
Okay. I like where your mind is at on this one, and we will, there's no point in going further down that part. We're gonna work to see if we can, what we can do to find that money. So we know what we're doing on section 12. We can get to the end here of section 13 and 14.
So
Not the end for today. We're gonna have to go back to each of them.
fully clear, just to, on this, do you want a report back on that amount? Or do you just want intent language? I want to make sure
We want the intent
okay, just
Language
the intent.
and the language that the agency's worked on that makes it
Yes.
possible to do all of it. And if they need clarification, they'll come back in between now and then and see what else we do.
Patrick has the language.
Yeah, so Patrick has sent me the language. I just didn't get it in time to include in this draft. So, okay, just making some quick notes to myself so that I remember what we talked about. I had a fun one the other day where my note to myself was, make change you discussed with Logan and Michelle. And I had to call Logan and be like, what did we discuss exactly? Because I forgot it was before the break.
So just one more
Yeah.
question on that.
I'm a point.
It's what Representative Keiser talked about, including the federal plus state amounts in with what?
It's not in Patrick's, but I just put it in my note.
Okay.
Yeah. So at least I don't think you anticipated that.
Those in the circle.
You might have. But I have put it in to include an intent section that says it is the
Okay.
intent of the General Assembly that the rate will reflect
Okay.
the foregone state and federal gas taxes and other things that you put in there. And I'll tweak the language and then you can look at it. And if it doesn't reflect what your actual intent is, we'll rewrite it until it does. So in this last piece here, last time we had the special fund provision for the EV supply equipment, EVSE. This is instead changing that to a one-time appropriation. So we're appropriating 1.4 million from the transportation fund to the Agency of Transportation for distribution to the Agency of Commerce and Community Development for programs to increase access to level 1 and 2 EVSE charging ports at workplaces or multi-unit dwellings or both. So the one thing I do want to note in here is that the last time we were here, we were discussing whether or not level 1 should stay in there. If we take that out, it requires a statutory change too, but I didn't want to overstep my portfolio and just make the change without committee discussion. So,
Representative White, I'm sorry. Yep.
From what I remember, I thought we were gonna have Agency of Commerce and Community Development testimony about that, and then it was canceled because of scheduling stuff.
So,
They're coming
That-
tomorrow.
so as far as anything that we would suggest for changes, we're gonna wait for that, which has been rescheduled a couple of times. There was a full intent to have had it much sooner than we have, but we will discuss the level 1 and 2. We'll certainly get their testimony first before we but before we duke it out here. So,
right. So that's it for now. I will make changes. Let me just,
I'm sorry, David, there's nothing that has happened that would suggest a need to change the effective date either at any of these other suggested changes.
I'll have to look through the other changes. I may update the effective date. I'll flag it for you if I do.
Some discussion of effective dates earlier on some of the things, so.
I think we've settled on Green Mountain Transit language that doesn't require a change in the effective date. But I'll have to look at, for example, the MBUF language may have some different effective dates. I'll just have to take a look and C. It looks like I am back with you. There's a placeholder for my time for the next couple of days and then Friday morning.
You in the afternoons after 4 if it's available.
Yes. It's not on my calendar yet, but
Well, we,
good to know.
we have.
I'm available, so
Needed as the updates occur and anything else that comes up to try to push this particular bill, our bill forward from, if you're keeping score at home, or I'm trying to keep score at home, there's 14 sections, 7 of them we checked off today. Section 14 is not technically checked off because Damon just told us he's gonna look at that again. I see section 4 related to the cancellation of projects for review and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, I'm sorry, 8 out of 14. There is clarification coming back on section 6, but that's informational based on rail banking. It didn't change anybody's opinion of putting it into law. Section 10 on Green Mountain Transit Services is still open. The town highway projects, 2 different sections on section 11 is being reworked. The section 12 is working with Patrick Murphy and the MBUF and the other feedback there. And section 13, we're getting testimony tomorrow morning so that we can revisit section 13 if need be. And section 14 will be the effective date. So I guess 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out of 14 are checked off in my notes. And so
What was can you just clarify the 1.4? That's from the EV fees, right?
that's the EV registration fees.
So that money's
Yeah.
in there.
And they're,
yeah, and that's replaced the special fund proposal. So we're back to
It
having
gives
a,
them the authority, but I thought there was, we needed to do something with an additional 600,000 that they didn't program. That they had to revert or something, no? Or no, no,
yeah, I think any other changes are happening in the big bill.
okay.
So I've been told to stay away from reversions and other things like that and let that happen in the
So
big
that's
bill.
a separate piece.
Yeah. So what usually happens,
Oh,
we can dig into it. That one's not ringing a bell to me. It was almost,
Yeah.
but it's, the first afternoon after a while.
yeah, I can check, but I think I talked with Logan on the 1.4 piece and whether we needed to do anything else, and his indication was no, we're doing any other changes are going to happen in the big bill, and there's a decent chance that the Appropriations Committee's amendment to this bill will be to pull that section 13 out and tuck it into the, is it E, I think, where they put the policy sections in the big bill, or into one of the B sections where they put the appropriations, and just do that. So they'll probably just take that out and tuck it into the big bill because they like to keep all of the appropriations in one package so that when they're negotiating at the last minute at the end of the session, they don't accidentally lose track of something and then end up with an unbalanced budget.
Representative Burke.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if, like this is for 26 one-time funding. What if the MBUF is not ready at the end of, for beginning of 27? I'm just asking the question, do we need to have any other contingency language that this would continue until MBUF is ready, or what? I don't know.
On the registration money.
Yeah, on
So
the money for on the registration.
that is based on the estimate for the coming fiscal year. So I think that amount is going to change. So it'd be another one-time appropriation.
Right, we could just do that if it.
We're going to need to do a new one next year based on updated numbers. So we could probably project out, but then we'd probably have to change it.
Okay. Just
yeah.
thinking ahead.
So, okay. So I think the next thing you have me on the bill for is a walkthrough of, get the bill number here. Excuse me.
426.
426.
we got a preview of the Friday before we left from the sponsors.
Yep.
And I probably jumped the gun a little bit since we hadn't discussed it at all as a committee and put Damian on this, for today, but, I think that there's also been some discussions about sections to highlight, and we're not going to try to do all 45 pages in the next half an hour to 40 minutes, but we're going to hit some highlights and,
So I think Representative Pouch tried to send me a list of which sections to highlight. For whatever reason, it has not ended up in my inbox yet. So what I may just ask is that you kind of give me a thumbs up or thumbs down as we go through, and I'll either give you the 5-second version or the more detailed version. What's our adjournment time for today, Mr. Chair? What's
3:45,
Okay, 30 minutes.
maybe to 3:50 at the most, but 3:45 to 3:50.
I can do it. All right, let me share the page. Go. Okay. Okay. There it goes. Great. There we go. It's going on. It'll get there. That is not what I wanted to share. I'm sorry. It was sharing the whole document. So. Let's try again. While I'm getting there, we're going to be starting on page 3 with section 2. So section 2.
Yeah, and it's really just section 2A, which talks about the mileage smart program.
Right.
And that's something I would like to talk about. To me, that is a big priority. I know that $3 million, I don't know where it is, but this is a program that helps very low income people purchase vehicles. We're going to hear about it and hear the success of it. And if we're talking at all about affordability, and we know how transportation is an essential element in people's lives. And I firmly believe that this is a really, really lovely program, and that we should figure out where to find $3 million for it to run this for another year. It's sad to me that all our incentive programs have run out of money, and that's another story, because we were doing, we've been very successful in helping people get into cheaper transportation options, whether buying a new vehicle for people who've never owned a new vehicle, be able to buy one, and for the fleet incentives, and for the replace your ride incentives, and the federal incentives. And all of that is gone, except I would love to be able to hold on to do one more year of Mileage Smart program. And that's, I feel very, very strongly about the program, and mostly as a way to help people get into lower cost transportation. It just does help our air quality. It does help our carbon emissions, but I think the main thing that program does is allows people to have a decent, fuel efficient car. Yeah, that's all I need to say about that. And we'll let everything else in that section go for now, right?
Okay.
Some waterfall materializes somewhere.
All right. So
discussion.
So I think I'm supposed to be trying to walk through the bill.
We're,
Or
the way it'll work is, especially for newer members, they're going to walk through and highlight the pieces that, because they're, my understanding from the Friday before, when the highlighting pieces, we can't do everything, and we wouldn't have the time to get testimony on both sides of it. And so the way it would work in any of this situation, I did take the liberty of saying the committee was going to take it up, based on commitments to the speaker and other pieces, that we would at least do it. And the only way that we can do that is for them to highlight the pieces that are the highest priority for them. And then we would have comment from the agency on any of those pieces. And then as a committee, we would have to discuss it. And then to see what testimony we would get, both from sides that could possibly be for it or against it, and to see where we're at during that whole process. So if it is its own separate bill that the committee is reviewing, they're presenting it as the sponsors, they're highlighting their piece, we would then, the agency would be the first place we would go for comment, and then whatever else we would or wouldn't take on. But please, Representative.
And I just
Answer
want
your
to add,
question.
not to pass it as a separate bill, but to bring it into the transportation bill.
Their effort is whether we would or would not be able to add any pieces to the committee spot. So discussion will happen, but is not happening now. Right now, it's our legislative council walking us through provisions that.
I'm just saying that was, the intent was not to present separate, that would to put us for proposals
Thank you for
out there that could be considered to be folded into the TDO.
Okay, yes, thank you. And I appreciate the clarification for that.
Okay, so section 2, that it's pretty self-explanatory. It's funding. Section 3, is this a priority or? Okay, so section 3, just the quick highlight is this would have been a one-time funding increase for public transit. Section 4 would create a new retail delivery fee. So understanding that I am on a little bit of a time limit here, given your committee schedule, what this does is it basically for transactions that are currently subject to sales tax that are done, that have a delivery aspect to them. So you place an order online, whether it's through a Vermont business or an out-of-state business, it gets delivered to your door. What this would do is it would say that for any one of those transactions, there is an additional fee of 30 cents. It's not per delivery, it's per transaction. So if it comes in 4 boxes, it's still 30 cents. If it comes in 1 box, it's 30 cents. So this means the state and the vendor don't have to figure out that aspect of it. And this is based on what Minnesota and Colorado have done. They're the 2 states that I know of that have implemented this. And so this was largely based on that. So the simple version of this is it says if you're subject to the state sales tax, you're also subject to the delivery fee if it's getting delivered to the customer or to a location that the customer designates. And then it charges the fee of 30 cents. And then the rest of it is tied to our sales tax law. One important thing to note is that this would exclude things that are not subject to sales tax. So things like clothing and food that are not subject to sales tax are not covered by this. That could be something, given the amount of orders of clothing and food, that you want to discuss, but that's not for me to say. That's a policy decision. For simplicity, this was drafted so it's tied to sales tax, which is what other states have done. And I don't know the extent to which their sales tax law tracks our sales tax law. But this was set up to sort of be the most simple program available in terms of implementation. So that.
Representative Pouch has a comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's comment, not a question. I think the intent here really is to focus this election so that next year the legislature can decide to move it forward. Let's move it forward. And there's a few questions. I thought there was minimum size of a company. So if a company is less than, $1 million business, they're not subject to this. And also like DoorDash, they don't collect sales tax, I don't think. You know, pharmacy delivery, a grocery store delivery, there's really no sales tax there.
Right. Right, so food is not subject to sales tax, clothing is not subject to sales tax, so there are some exclusions from sales tax. And as far as the online collection of sales tax, there is a sort of a minimum company size and minimum exposure. So if you do fewer than a certain number of transactions per year or a certain dollar amount in Vermont, you're not subject to it. The one thing that you might want to look at is whether you want to just explicitly exclude a certain, you know, dollar size in Vermont. If you wanted to avoid, you know, so for example, if you have a mom and pop store that also starts doing deliveries, they would be collecting sales tax at their register. Would they also have to collect sales tax on this? And these are things that if you did this and you did it, say, with a delayed effective date, you could have, you know, Department of Taxes come back with recommendations on things to clean up. With 5 days to go, I'm not sure how much time you have for testimony on the details, but that's something to note. The only other thing I wanted to note in here is that the returns required would be submitted on the same schedule as sales tax returns. And then there is a provision in here for if you place an order, but before it's shipped, you cancel the order, the vendor would be required to refund the fee to you. However, if they've shipped it and then you return it, you don't get the fee back. So that's just sort of the divider there, is that once it's shipped, that fee is collected and goes to the state.
And this was one of, you know, there were several in our study of possible ways to increase funds for transportation. This was one of them that I think some of us think, hey, this is doable. It's not going to cost a lot of money to collect because we already have the system in place. And this has an impact on roads, particularly rural roads. So that would be the reason, you know, we, in my opinion, we get it ready. If we wanted to implement it, it's pretty much figured out.
Yep. Representative Storm.
Just a question.
Representative White, what the heck?
Uh,
Sorry. I don't say something.
I knew you
I
were
just wrote something else.
attending.
And what I wrote is what I said. Sorry. You
I really like this
don't want to read my note.
proposal. I'm a little troubled with 30 cents per transaction because I think there are some really good, maybe unintended consequences of something like this, which is that it disincentivizes a company from sending an order. It would be nice if we could disincentivize a company from sending an order in 4 different boxes to be delivered at 4 different times with 4 different trucks to one house. So it'd be great if we could figure out how to disincentivize companies from multiple deliveries. So I'd really love to see a per delivery, not per transaction. The other concern I have is on not excluding clothing, because I think that is something that a lot of people are ordering a lot of. And again, it's just this use on roads. So if there's a way for us to try to include clothing or kind of, you know, look at items that are not taxed, I think that would be.
So there's always a way to do these things. The trick is within 5 days.
Yeah.
Right, so.
And I think what we're hearing is that you're not going to get it all worked out in 5 days, but we're going to at least lay the groundwork as much as we can for.
Well, so I think what you're getting right now is a walkthrough, and then the committee will decide if there are things you want to include in the bill this year based on some testimony and discussion. And then if you do want to include something like this in the transportation bill this year, one of the things that you may want to consider is, do you want to include the language with the delayed effective date and a comeback with proposals for changes? Do you want to include the language, as soon as it can be implemented? Do you want to just ask for tax to come back with a proposal for how to do it? There are a variety of ways to do it. So that'll, I think, probably be what comes next if you decide that this is something that's moving forward this year rather than something that is maybe being looked at for the future or something like that. So those are, without commenting on the sort of policy issues, those are all sorts of things there. I did want to just highlight some of those issues because what we did in putting this together was say, what have other states done?
Right.
And we put that out there and we tied it to the sales tax because that's what's been done in other states to make it easy to implement. And I think the same thing is this per transaction rather than per delivery. Also, because it's easiest to implement, not necessarily because it does the most. And the 30-cent charge comes from the funding study. That was just what they modeled.
Right.
So we use that as the base model. It's worth noting that Colorado and Minnesota use different amounts, and their amounts are not the same as each other either. So there are a lot of different places where you could make adjustments here.
Okay,
So just worth keeping in mind.
thank you.
So we want to try to go to the other things that are potentially,
Yeah, so
Looking to be asked.
section 5, is this a thumbs up? No, okay, so all that section 5 would do is, actually, this
Yeah, it's
is,
the same.
this is taking the retail. This is the other piece. Their proposal is to put the retail delivery fees into the town highway aid. So that's something that's worth discussing. The next piece is the outreach. Is this a high priority or not a high priority? This is outreach on EVs, idling, safe passing, public transportation. Okay. So this would just have been an outreach requirement for the agency on a variety of different things, including EV ownership, idling laws, safe passing laws, and public transit. I think I covered all of the different subjects, but the language in it describes the specifics more. Section 7 would, sorry, yeah. So section 7 would have been directing AOT to continue its work on expansion of the PEV and e-bike market. Section 8. So what section 8 would do, and I'll go, this is a higher priority. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say that section 7 would continue our partnership with Drive Electric Vermont. And even though they've been there to administer they might be, if we were to do the Knowledge Smart program, they might be needed to help administer that. So I just want to put a pin there as something that we might come back to and talk about.
So section 8 would require AOT to consider vehicle miles traveled. And it's really section 8, 9, 10, 11, and maybe 12, if I remember right. This would require AOT to consider vehicle miles traveled in projects. So section 8 defines vehicle miles traveled as the estimated sum of the miles traveled by all motor vehicle trips within a specific area during a calendar year. Section 9 so would say that the agency shall develop a mission statement to reflect, among other things, the need for transportation projects that will reduce vehicle miles traveled in addition to the other factors that are already considered, such as improvements to economic infrastructure, use of resources in an efficient manner, et cetera. And then would say that in developing the state's annual transportation program, the state would develop and incorporate designs that provide integrated, safe, and efficient transportation that reduce vehicle miles traveled and that are consistent with recommendations in the climate. Oh, I'm trying to remember what CEP stands for. Comprehensive Energy Plan. There we go. I apologize. It's at this point in the day, the acronyms are starting to escape me. And then again, the agency would provide in the front of the transportation program book a detailed explanation describing factors in its prioritization system, which shall include a reduction in vehicle miles traveled. So again, you're basically making vehicle miles traveled reductions a priority for transportation here. So that means shifting people from motor vehicle use to other forms of transportation, or finding ways for them to use motor vehicles more efficiently. Section 10C does the same thing with highway and bridge projects. Section 11 would do the same thing in the transportation planning process, 19 VSA 10I. And then that brings us to section 12, which is increased highway funding for rural towns. Is this okay? So all of this did was just,
I'm sorry, we're on section 12.
Section 12, yeah.
So the one,
16.
all of the discussion about vehicle miles traveled,
That's in the state planning process.
planning piece and whatnot. Did I understand you say, is it saying somewhere in here that projects that might shift people to other modes is one of the goals? And then one of the other goals is perhaps something that's much more highly efficient, like where some group of cars sits at a red light waiting to go left, and now they have their own lane to go left, and now they're far more efficient than they were before? Is that also what you were saying about using vehicles more efficiently?
So reduction in vehicle miles traveled means that it reduces the total number of miles traveled by motor vehicle trips in a specific area.
I thought you said something about also for more efficiently.
I think I did say that, and I think I used terms that could be sort of construed more broadly. When what it really is getting at is reducing the number of miles there. So that could be shifting to other modes of transportation. It could also be reducing the number of miles that someone needs to travel within a specific area in their motor vehicle to go about their daily business. There are different ways to reduce the number of vehicle miles traveled. The primary one is saying that we have, individuals could walk or bike or take a bus, or do something else which will take cars off the road, which will reduce vehicle miles that are traveled in the sum total per year.
Okay, and so in the planning process of projects, this concept would be part of what you're suggesting to be done in planning and as a
Right.
mode. Okay.
Planning and prioritization of state
Prioritization.
projects.
Okay. I'm sorry, I just.
No, that's,
Clear exactly.
thank you for clarifying that, because there are other things. I think what you were getting at more is sort of like, how many cars can this serve if we're adding a turning lane that reduces traffic backups at a certain spot?
Personnel.
Yeah, the goal is to align transportation planning more closely with the land use reforms that we passed last year. So in a place where you want to incentivize there to be housing density and an environment where people can walk and bike and transit are served by transit, you want to be making it easier to build complete streets rather than increase turning lanes for vehicles and things like that, because that would work against that. So it's not to say that a turning lane addition might not be appropriate someplace else, but right now, these things are not as easy to argue the benefits of as they could be.
It is. All right, we don't have to go any further today. I just, sorry, I don't understand what we were getting at there.
Right place, right planning approach, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
So sections 12, 13, and 14, in the interest of time here, what they do is they reduce the share, the local share for what are rural towns on various for various state programs. So basically, they're knocking that local share in half for rural towns. So that's what 12, 13, and 14 would propose to do. Section 15, the complete streets. Yeah, okay. So section 15 directs the agency to provide technical and planning assistance to municipalities for incorporating complete streets principles into municipal projects. And that would go into the complete streets law. Section 16 would update the language from 2024 Act 148 regarding the replacement of Vermont state design standards to direct the agency to ensure that the replacement standards, and we're on page 23 here, include prioritization for reducing vehicle miles traveled in downtown and village centers, which is gets back to what Representative Lally was just talking about. Alignment of eligible transportation improvements with future land use in downtown and village centers through the use of transect maps, context-sensitive design standards for downtown and village centers identified by regional planning commissions, including to ensure that standards are compatible with the existing size of the community and the intensity of activity within the community. Investments are directed to the development of a comprehensive pedestrian network, and design and engineering standards provide for ease of understanding and implementation of things like narrow travel lanes, slow zones for motor vehicle traffic, crosswalks, enhanced shoulders to accommodate bicycles or pedestrians or both, sidewalks, and public transit services. Identification of standards for reducing vehicle travel lane widths and other traffic calming methods that can be incorporated into downtown and village centers, requirements for reconstructed bridges and upsized culverts to incorporate pedestrian facilities, and consideration of guidance from Department of Forest Parks and Rec, Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation's Vermont Urban and Community Forestry Program Green Streets Guide into the design of state highways in downtown and village centers. So importantly, that's in downtown and village centers, not when you're getting out into the countryside. So that's just want to make clear that distinction there. And so that is that piece there. For the National Historic Preservation Act review, also, okay. So this would require the Agency of Transportation in consultation with the State Historic Preservation Officer and the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation to seek to amend the programmatic agreement among Federal Highway Administration, the State Historic Preservation Officer, the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, and the Agency of Transportation regarding the federal aid highway program in Vermont to categorize the creation of new bicycle and pedestrian facilities as either exempt activities or screened activities, and then to provide a written update on its efforts pursuant to that section no later than November 15th of this year. To boil this down, essentially the current National Historic Preservation review makes the construction of those facilities more difficult, and this would ease the construction of those facilities in areas where you're subject to that review. And for more details on that, you would want to talk to someone who has a better understanding of what that review looks like. But this is essentially to streamline regulatory hurdles in this area here because of the way those facilities are currently categorized. How about local speed limits? Okay. So section 18 would amend the current law for municipality to set a local speed limit. And it would provide that the local speed limits could, essentially what it does is it takes away, sorry about that. Takes away the requirement that a municipality get an engineering and traffic study performed when they're setting a local speed limit. And it allows them to set that speed limit at a speed that is not more than 50 miles an hour or effectively not less than 25 miles per hour, depending on different factors here. And then also in for a state highway that is not a limited access highway within the body of the municipality, it could set the speed limit at not more than 50 miles an hour, not less than 25 miles an hour. And then in a village center, it could set, or a downtown development district or a new town center development district, it could set that speed limit at less than 25 miles an hour. So basically, outside of that village or town center area, you're at 25 to 50. And in that village center, the municipality could determine to set it at below that amount. And this is all just local control over speed limit. Sure. And so the main amendment is adding the areas where you could set it at less than 25 miles an hour and eliminating the requirement that you need to do a traffic study in the first part, which is, well, the sponsors can speak to that more if you want to move forward with this. The Regional Planning Commission piece, is this, this would be, it's very short. The regional, it would requires, yeah, it requires regional planning commissions to coordinate regional transportation projects with affected municipalities to enhance resilience and implementation of the climate action plan. How about the electrical vehicle supply equipment?
I think there's agreement that this, is something to look at, but it's no way this is going to be able to get into the T-bill because there's been no investigation or testimony at all that I know on this topic.
I
Right.
think that we can keep this.
The Senate took testimony on this language last year in the Economic Development Committee in the context of landlord-tenant law. So what this would basically say is that renters and condo owners, so this is multiple sections here. It's sections 20, 21, and I think 22. What it basically says is that if you're a renter, a condo owner, or part of a homeowners association, within certain restrictions, you have the right to have electrical vehicle charging equipment installed at the either on the premises of your rental or within the common elements of the condominium or the homeowners association there. There are exceptions here. So if EV charging equipment is already provided, if there's no parking provided as part of the rental agreement, if there are fewer than 5 parking spaces, so individual units with 1 parking space wouldn't be covered by this. And then there are also things like this doesn't obligate the landlord or the condominium to provide reserved parking if they don't already do so. And it also requires that the EV charging equipment be installed to comply with all federal, state, and local requirements, both zoning, land use, and other restrictions. And it also requires compliance with either the landlord or the homeowners association or condominium association's requirements for the installation, use, maintenance, and removal. And then it makes the tenant or the condo owner or the homeowner responsible for costs here. So it's not putting the cost burden onto the landlord, but it is requiring them to grant approval, assuming the individual can pay for it. Does that make sense? That's the best nutshell I can do here. So it's a requirement to allow installation, assuming that it can be paid for and complies. And that brings us to section 23. So I'm just going to skip way ahead here. Section 23, really simple section. This requires public EV charging equipment to take a credit card instead of requiring an app or a specific card from the vendor.
And it adds that option,
Right.
Yeah, it's just so you
Yeah.
don't have a certain app.
Right, so you could roll up with your Visa card or your MasterCard or something like that and just tap that the same as you would do at the grocery store. The state rights of way, the use of the state rights of way is this. Yeah, okay.
We're gonna have to.
All right, yeah, we're at time. Do you want me to pick this up tomorrow or?
Pick up that, we have scheduled, first of all, we have to get the testimony in the morning that we've been postponed a couple different times on what we're doing with the, EV registration money, what's happening over at ACCB. And then we have some time on the schedule that we can pick up which ones are priority. I don't know that Damien's available at that time frame to pick up the rest of the bill. We do have him in the afternoon, depending on how long the floor goes, to pick up with the changes. And the changes in the bill that we worked on is scheduled for every afternoon. And then we can pick up where we're at in the last 5 or 6 pages of this, either through committee discussion or when Damien's next available. We'll be back in a little bit, but if you want to, I guess you have the choice. If you want to do it that way, but it's Tuesday at 3:45, so we adjourn. And we will adjourn and we will have a committee assistant pick it up with Damien as to when the next time we can finish through these last 6 pages. We do have a committee time discussion tomorrow to talk about priorities and related to the T-bill and additional pieces for the T-bill that may or may not be brought forward. We can at least have more discussion there tomorrow at 10:15.
Well, we could see perhaps if Damon,
Right.
we could finish it up.
If he's available, we will finish that part up. If not, we'll talk about priority pieces from there.
So tomorrow morning,
And you guys can work that part out and you can decide your